Hello, everybody, and welcome back to NASMARB Garage Pass Episode 3. As always, I'm here with our NASMARB analysts, Luke and Sham.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Welcome to Garage Pass, Episode 3.
We have just come off of watching the Lightspeed 400 from Hyperspeedway, and it was an extremely exciting race. There's a lot of action to get into, but first we're going to quickly run down the final results of the race. So, starting from the bottom to the top, our two DNQs were Prime and Electro. Obviously, Prime has been off to a really rough start at the beginning of the season. Electro's an interesting one because they actually had a ton of speed in their second run. One of the faster laps we saw from that second line, but they had a really, really bad lap on their first run, which caused them to DNQ. Nugget, as well, as had a tough start to the season. They finished in 18th. Sal, who was a top seed in their group, dropped all the way to 17th. Winks finished in 16th. Spitzer was 15th. Steve in 14th. Again, he was a top seed, number 4 seed, and finished in 14th. 13th for Confetti. Oak finished in 12th. Mozilla rounds out the bottom half in 11th. And for the top half of the results, we have Murakami in 10th, Woodpecker in 9th, Neptune in 8th, Quillo in 7th, and our final 6 were Streamer finishing in 6th, Piper, her second consecutive top 6 to start her career, finishing in 5th, Bloodstormer in 4th, coming off of his second place finish in this race last year, with 2 Red Pandas Racing drivers making the final, with Earl finishing in 3rd, his first final since race 5 of last season. Jack Tato, his second consecutive final in this race. He finished in 2nd, behind Lemon Drizel, who was able to back up his Lightspeed 400 win from last season to claim his second career victory, both in this race. Knowing these results and seeing what a crazy race that was, especially the final, what stuck out to you guys leading up to that crazy final?
Yeah. So, what I want to touch upon is there was a lot of aggressive racing from a couple different drivers. First one I wanted to point out was during the Murakami and Drizel matchup. Uh, both drivers actually were racing each other very hard, up to the point where both of them threw a really good block on the other driver just to prevent them from scoring a point. I think that was one of the more exciting matches for me, as if that was something to look forward to for the rest of the race. I think that was something that everyone else was keeping an eye on. And for the second race in a row, we had another Woodpecker and Piper matchup. Yeah, those teammates seem like they just can't keep away from each other. Uh, yeah, Piper threw a pretty big move against Woodpecker, scoring the first point. Then, when the lane switch happened, Woodpecker threw another big move against Piper, scoring the second point, and then it came back to for Piper's advantage, and Piper ended up advancing. These two, I tell you, they've been at it for quite a few times this season, and I think they're gonna keep that going.
Yeah, and I also think that's interesting because those, as you mentioned, are teammates at Red Pandas Racing. By the way, Woodpecker was the lowest Red Pandas Racing driver in 8th place. All 4 of their cars were in the top 8. But yeah, they clashed again. We had another teammate clash with Kuz Motorsports in the first group as well. So teammate battles continuing to happen here early in the season, just like we saw last race. So that's something to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, I'd say another one of the interesting race highlights was Bloodstorm against Drizel in the final 6. Obviously, both of them being a final 3 in the last season's heat when we matched here. Bloodstorm had a really good race, getting the first 2 heat wins, but just, of course, the classic, he got Drizel'd and just got 3-0 sweeped right at the end, even though Bloodstorm really didn't do anything wrong. It's just, Drizel is just too good and outraced him.
Yeah, I want to say something about Bloodstorm real quick. I think if you're able to beat Rizel at anything, I think that really shows a testament of how good you are. And Bloodstorm has been on my radar for a bit now. I think that 86 car has quite a lot of speed under the hood. A shame that we couldn't really see much more of him since he got put up with probably the best driver in the series right now. But being able to beat Drizel not once but twice in that matchup really shows that Bloodstorm could be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, had he been able to get that last point win, who knows? Maybe he would have been the winner of this race.
And hey, I think that's a good point to bring up Bloodstorm as well, because personally, I think Bloodstorm is extremely overlooked in this series. He started out with a DNQ in his first career race, but ever since then, he was 5th in overall points last year, and I feel like nobody realizes that. He got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs by Oak, the eventual champion, and so that's probably why he goes under the radar, but he is 6th in points this year as well, extremely consistent. He's been really strong basically his entire career after that DNQ, so I think he's definitely somebody to keep an eye on.
And I feel like the biggest story is not even Drizel, it's actually from Earl. He absolutely killed it in the beginning. He took out Steve in the big upset. I think it was 4 and he beat the 4 seed as a 13. He then went later on to beat Streamer, the number 1 seed. So his run to finals was insane. He didn't do the best in finals. He won the first 2 heats and then none for the rest of them, but just the fact that he was able to make it to finals was insane.
Yeah, putting the weight of Red Panda's racing on his shoulders, he really has something to prove, and I think he did just that. And if only I had waited one more race to pick him as my underdog, then I would have felt really proud of myself. But hey, better late than never. So I think Earl's also someone who's got something to prove, and I think he really showed it, being one of the 2 leading Red Panda's racing drivers to make it to the finals.
Yeah, and this is really their... No one has a home track, but this is their stomping grounds for Red Pandas Racing. They have never lost in 3 races here. They've had the most team drivers to a final in the 3 races combined that they've had. Any team has had at any track. They've just been extremely strong here, and he was able to take advantage of that and put himself in a much better position in the points already through 2 races than he was after the first race.
So yeah, talking more about the final heats. I like the last 3 of them were very intense with I think it was Jack Tato and Drizel in a very tight heat in the last 2, with Jack Tato barely stealing it out from Drizel in heat 7, and then Drizel making the amazing pass to take it from Jack Tato in the final heat to win the event.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Tato showed a lot. I mean, he proved that last year's race was not a fluke at this track. We know that this was basically his only good race of the whole season last year. But coming off of a good qualifying effort last week, obviously didn't have a great race, finished in 12th after not finishing a heat in the final 12. He was a higher seed, though. He's got a strong race car early in the season, was able to take advantage, get back to the final. Unfortunately for him, it is a tough draw whenever you face Lemon Drizel, and he put up a good fight. Won 2 of the heats. He won the second place heat against Earl to get an extra spot. And really, he was coming from behind. He was the one to keep the race alive in that 7th heat when he was able to win the close one against Lemon Drizel to make it 3-2-2. He's been really strong at this track. He's got the best average finish of any driver here. 3.0 is a ridiculous average to have at this track. He's finished 3rd, 4th, and 2nd. He's got to get that win at some point at this track. He's been really, really strong here. So definitely a good showing for Jack Tato. I think any Jack Tato fans out there, you have something to look forward to. There's a really strong car, and he's just got to be able to hone that at other tracks besides Hyperspeedway.
Yeah, so talking about our race winner Drizel, so I really do think this race really showed how strong Drizel is. He was the fastest in his first 2 heats against Murakami. Despite his 0-2 against Bloodstorm, he eventually swept him the last 3 the last 3 matchups, and then in the finals he didn't score a point until the 4th round. So he was down 2-1-0. Then he swept the next 3, and then he showed enough perseverance to eventually pull off that amazing move at the very end and snuck out the win. I think that really showed for me for the rest of the season that Drizel, without a doubt, has probably the fastest car and the best racecraft around the rest of his competition, and that's why I felt really confident with picking him to win this race.
Yeah, I mean, Lemon Drizel, this is an insane start to the season, 2nd and 1st. We'll talk about the points in a minute, but he's got a big points lead, for first place right now. This is another one of his very strong tracks, but I think what's impressive about this race is that he had adversity this time around. If you remember last year in this race, that's our only 4-0-0 sweep in the final to date, was Lemon Drizel as a number 14 seed, but he was extremely fast, dominant. This year, he was not dominant. He looked dominant at times, but he was not the absolute fastest every single time. He put himself in a hole and he was able to dig out of that hole. Both times he's been in the final this year, he has not won any of the first 3 heats, but he's gotten himself back in the race, and this time he was able to go and take the win. So it's been a really impressive start to the season for Lemon Drizel, a much stronger one than he had to the start of last season, and that's scary because he was really good last year too. And so talking about Lemon Drizel and his points lead, he's got 80 points through 2 races, which is an insane number to have. Piper, his teammate, is actually in second as a rookie with 64. So he's got a 16-point lead for the number 1 seed right now with a win. Third place is Neptune with 62 points. And then it goes down to 4th place, and somebody who's been kind of quietly under the radar there is Quillo in 4th place in the points with 53. Jack Tato has 48 points and jumps all the way up to 5th. Bloodstorm is in 6th. Earl is in 7th, with our reigning champion Oak in 8th. Streamer is in 9th, which is right around where he was last year at this point in time. Steve is in 10th. He's got so much speed, he just really needs to focus in and make those races happen. He's got to be able to make it happen in the race with that fast car. Murakami is 11th, and our current cutoff right now is 34 points for Sal. He is holding the final playoff spot at the moment. Obviously, we've got 6 races to go. That is a long time, but Sal currently has a 2-point lead over Woodpecker, who is the lowest Red Pandas racing driver in the field right now with 32 points. And then it drops to a 10-point deficit for Mozilla. He's got 24 through the first 2 races. We know Mozilla's a strong racer. He can come back from a tough start for this rookie team, Kuz Motorsports. After that is Electro, who again has a ton of speed, but coming off of his 3rd career DNQ, which by the way is Electro somehow has the most DNQs in the sports history so far with his 3rd career DNQ. So the inconsistency is a story for Electro so far. Confetti's in 16th right now, coming off of probably his worst 2 tracks. He's headed to DDT and Mayhem, which Mayhem is by far his best. DDT was pretty good for him last year too, so we'll see if he can bounce back from a tough start. Spitzer is in 17th, with Winks in 18th with 10 points, and the Nugget and Prime have both DNQ'd once and finished in 18th in the other race that they qualified. So obviously a really tough start for them, but hey, if there's anything that we can say through 2 races last year, the champion had half the points of Nugget and Prime right now. He had 4 points, Oak, who missed the first 2 races of last year.
Yeah, one of the drivers in that standings I'm kind of looking at is Confetti. As Hershey said, he is coming off 2 of his worst tracks, and like in Season 1, he had a very poor race 1 and 2, but ended up bouncing back at the end of the season, so I personally won't be counting Confetti out yet, even though he is 15 points below the cut line. I still think he might be getting closer to the point cutoff line.
I think who I'm also going to keep an eye on is 66 of Mozilla. This is not the Mozilla who normally we would see regularly performing well on a consistent basis. Mozilla being 10 points out of the cutoff, I think that's just, a bit of unfortunate circumstances, so maybe some bad luck. Kuz Motorsports cars kind of having a pretty rough start to this season, but I don't think that'll continue. I think at least for Mozilla, he's definitely capable of getting back up into the playoff hunt so that he can get back into the playoffs for another chance at a championship. For Nugget, uh, just an extremely rough time for him as well. But I think Kuz Motorsports in general can get their act together sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and personally, I know you guys are not super high on Prime right now, but hey, we've seen Prime come out of absolutely nowhere before to win a race and to almost win another race last year. Anybody from top to bottom in this list can make it to the playoffs at this point. There's a lot of season left. So this is just our standings after a quarter of the season. So long way to go. And so now we'll head into our race picks, and we'll first start out by reviewing your race picks from last week. So we'll start with your underdog picks, which didn't necessarily go as well as your top dogs. Luke, your underdog pick was Sal, and it was looking pretty good early. What happened?
I just think Sal kind of drew the short end of the stick. He had a really tough matchup with Piper. Piper's just been an exceptional rookie so far. Really hard to race against her, to beat her at so far at anything. And against Quillo, Quillo has some pretty decent averages here, averaging a 6.5, while Sal's 8.5 is just a tad bit uh, underneath Quillo. And just an unfortunate drive for Sal as well, and he having DNF'd in that second race in that first matchup. Yeah, just overall a very unlucky time for Sal that I expected a lot more from him.
Yeah, I mean, Sal was a top seed, and he was coming off of a really good finish to start out Fortune Racing's season. But yeah, I mean, not finishing the last heat is always detrimental to your overall time. A 4.4 is not fast enough to beat a lot of these guys who got out in the second heat, because typically it's cleaner when you have 2 guys versus 3 on the track. And so DNFing when it was just him versus Quillo was really detrimental and dropped him all the way to 17th from 6th. So a really big drop for Sal, but he's got some speed early in the season, so it's not it for Sal. And for Sham, you picked Winks again, and he finished 16th this week.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't really...
He made the race.
That's true. I can't really say anything other than, whoops, I didn't do very well. I mean, I wouldn't say Winks performed poorly, but yeah, he definitely was on the lower end of the seed and got taken out by the 2 higher seeded picks on him.
Yeah, I mean, Winks right now, it looks like he doesn't have the speed at the moment. But I will say a tough draw. I know I've said this a lot, but if you look at it, he had a tough group. He was obviously the lowest seed, but he was facing his teammate Bloodstorm, who finished in 4th. We know he's really strong at this track and really strong overall. And he was also facing Woodpecker, who 1, holds the track record at this track, 2, is a winner at this track, and 3, is a member of Red Pandas Racing, which is dominant at Hyperspeedway. So it's hard to judge Winks based on this performance. We'll see if this season turns around. It's been a tough start for him.
Yeah, I would definitely say for both Luke and I's underdog picks, they were probably in the hardest groups, Group 3 and 6, but just ended up being the ones that did not make the initial cut, so we're not able to improve any of the rest of the race.
But on the positive side, we have your top dogs, your main picks for this race. Sham, we'll start with yours. You picked Jack Tato. He qualified 2nd, and he finished 2nd.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very Jack Tato race. As we said, he's gotten to the finals for the both Lightspeed 400s. Done very well in both of them. I was slightly less impressed with this one because he almost didn't make it in the groups and against Confetti, and needed to have a 3-0 deficit to be at Piper, but that's just showing to say that, hey, he was able to dig deep and ended up making it to the finals. But definitely compared to his first track here, it wasn't as pretty, but definitely still a very good race for Jack Tato.
I mean, personally, I think that's what shows what you have as a racer. You know, if you go into it dominant, you're the fastest car every single heat, it's hard to mess up sometimes. But being down 2-0 to Piper in the final 6 and being able to go 3-0 to finish that off, really strong showing from Jack Tato. As I said, he's an average finish of 3rd place at this track, which is crazy. That's the best all time. He's also scored 100 points at this track, even, which is the most of any driver at a single track in their career. So he's been really strong here, and he showed it again this past week.
Yeah, definitely showing up every other racer that this is their home turf, and this is the track that I will be doing well at. So I'm interested to see when we come back here if he can keep up the streak and get maybe a first or a fifth place.
Absolutely. And for Luke, well, what do you know? 2 weeks in a row, we have a correct winner pick. I mean, can you ever go wrong with picking Le Monde Drizel? I mean, he started 5th. He had the fastest overall lap time in qualifying before he had the spin on his second lap. But what did you see from Le Monde Drizel?
Well, I just saw just pure raw talent from this driver. I think it's hard to go against him at all. This is arguably one of his stomping grounds. This is Red Panda's racing stomping ground just in general. Giselle, this year at this track, and I think you actually touched upon this earlier, where he wasn't as dominant as he was here last year, but you know what? You still get the job done. He still showed why he's the best at this track. I think this year he showed he's capable of coming from behind, where he had that 2-0 against Bloodstorm and was able to sweep the last 3 races, and then he came from behind from a 2-1-0, as I said earlier on as well, in the final 3. I think Drizel is probably going to be a very early championship threat going forward. And I can say that with full confidence that everyone needs to watch out for Le Monde Drizel.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's the way that he did it this time. You look at the highlight package that he put together from just this race. I mean, you have that insane pass that happened, to end the race. Obviously, with help from his teammate Earl, but he was almost flipped over on the backstretch with contact from Jack Tato. Kind of backed off, took a little bump from Earl, and did a little crossover move and got by him. It was a tremendous finish for Le Monde Drizel, and again, the way that he was able to do it was really impressive this race.
Yeah, he was definitely a part of the entire highlight package throughout his entire course, throughout his entire race in this event.
And so now that we've covered your race picks from last week, as we head to race number 3 at DDT International, who you got? We have, again, 2 picks for you guys. Your top dog, and then we'll do your underdog. Sham, who's your main pick for this weekend?
It's someone we have yet to touch upon whatsoever. We've been saying Drizel this, Drizel that, but what about Streamer? Our from season 1, the 3-time winner. We've basically not touched upon him whatsoever because Drizel has just come out so hot, but now it's Streamer's time. This is his by far best track from any driver. He is a 2-for-2 winner here. So I feel like it is very hard to not think he is the lead pick for this track.
Yeah, I do agree, and I think you kind of like piggybacked off of what I did, picking Drizel for this race, with picking Streamer for this upcoming race. I mean, he's clearly undefeated here. You would be silly to bet against him. Streamer is probably gonna once again show why Obi Racing is also one of the better teams to also keep an eye on for. And I think he might carry that same speed and officially lock himself into a playoff spot this year as well. He's not gotten off to the greatest of starts, but that's still, you can't count out Streamer for sure.
Yeah, and if you're looking purely based on stats, as you said, he's undefeated here. He won both races at this track last year. Coming into the season, he had the most fastest laps of any driver at any track, with 6 last year at this track. His average qualifying was actually not that great, 4.5. Obviously, he won the pole the first race here, and then qualified 8th. But he's bounced back from that, that 8th place finish to win that race. Coming into the season, had the most points of any driver at any track, with 90 points in 2 races at this track. He has an insane record here at DDT, so that's certainly a top pick for this race. All right, so with Streamer off the table, Luke, who you got?
Now, remember when I said how you'd be silly to bet against Streamer? Well, I guess I'm gonna be that silly person. I'm gonna bet against Streamer, and put I'm gonna put up the person that he beat for the win last year. Yep, I'm gonna go with Drizel again. And funny enough, he actually has some really good stats here at the track. Qualified and finished second in the first DDT race. Qualified fourth and finished sixth in the second. Coming off of a 4-3-3 loss to Streamer in the first DDT race, and unfortunately losing to his teammate Woodpecker in the final six, which I look back on this and there were some really close finishes between him and his teammate of 2/10 or less, so it was just a matter of a blink of an eye if Drizel was going to win against Woodpecker to put himself in the finale for the second race in a row. But with Drizel riding a ton of momentum so far this season and accompanied with his really good stats up next to Streamer, I think these two are going to go at it once again at DDT. And I believe that Drizel will dethrone Streamer and he will take the crown as the new champion for DDT.
I think that is an incredibly hot take. I don't think that Giselle will do poor, but I would be very surprised if he is gonna quote unquote dethrone Streamer. I feel we've been talking so much Giselle so far. I think now that we're at Streamer's home turf, I think he's gonna make a breakout and go back into the spotlight. He even came off of a previous pole winner, even though he's not even that great at hyperspeedway. So it shows that he still has a lot of speed.
Well, I mean, those are certainly the top picks for sure at this track. I mean, last year they were 1-2 in heat wins. They were 1-2 in points scored at this track, 1-2 in average. So certainly you guys are going with the favorites to win this weekend. However, you got to pick somebody else too. Luke, who is your underdog pick?
Well, like how we said how he goes kind of unnoticed or and flies under the radar. Well, I'm gonna finally put him over the radar, if that makes any sense. I'm gonna pick Bloodstorm as my underdog pick. Looking back at Bloodstorm's averages, he's actually finished ninth both times here. The first race he was against Spitzer, and Spitzer was able to defeat him in the second stage. Bit of an interesting loss there, but fair enough to a Spitzer. He was the one who actually made it to the finale in that race. So you could say that Spitzer was actually one of the faster cars there, and Bloodstorm was just put in an awkward spot, being against one of the faster cars. You fast forward to the second DDT race where Bloodstorm was eliminated once again in the final 12, and guess who he was up against? The race winner, Streamer. And just again, yet another unfortunate matchup, being matched up against one of the fastest cars at the track. But I'm gonna focus this more on how Bloodstorm has started off this year. Like I said before, he was able to defeat Drizel in the first two races of his matchup at this past race. He's shown very incredible speed and momentum. Finishes of 10th and 4th so far to start the season, currently 6th in points. And he's actually the second highest out in points out of all of the drivers who made the playoffs last year. And guess who's ahead of him? Drizel. So I think Bloodstorm's officially going to make his mark in this series. I think he can finally get that first career win, and he's going to prove himself that he definitely belongs here in this series.
Yeah, well, it's certainly an interesting pick. With Bloodstorm, like we said, he's been very consistent in his season, in his career so far. So we'll see how he performs this week. Sham, who you got as your underdog pick?
Yeah, for my underdog pick, I think it might end up working out. I think Oak will end up being a decent pick. Definitely will be an underdog pick. I'm uncertain if he'll make it to the finals, but I think he definitely has a shot at the final six group. For in our last two times we were here, he got double 5th place. With even in the second time we were here, he was the pole setter. So, and with his start to this season, it's been pretty solid. He, as I said, he's up in the upper half of the points, but I think he'll have a decent race here.
Yeah, definitely. This is Oaks. I mean, statistically, it is his best track with the 2 5th places. Obviously he had Hyperspeedway and Spiral are kind of thrown off because he had the 2D and Qs there, but he's been very strong at this track. Like he said, he's got a pole here, so we'll see how he does at a track like this. He's coming off of an okay start to the season, but certainly a lot better than he started last year, and we'll see what the champ has this weekend. And that is about all we got this weekend for NASMARB Garage Pass. We're headed to DDT, as we've been talking about this weekend. Make sure to tune into qualifying, which will be tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Same time on Friday for the race, our third race of the season, approaching the halfway mark. We hope to see you there. For now, thank you, Sham and Luke, as always, for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this episode of NASMARB Garage Pass, and we'll see you at the track.